Good morning, everyone. I'm privileged to moderate this panel. It's focusing on Indo-European relations. My name is Grzegorz Bywalec. I work here at the University of Łódź, the Department of Asian Studies, especially dealing with economic development in India and other emerging markets. Let me welcome you all here. But before introducing our guests, I'd like to say that the invited guests are among the best scholars in Poland who deal with the issues connected to India. That's why I'm very pleased that they accepted our invitation. So I would like to welcome Professor Agnieszka Kuszewska-Bohnert from Krakow, from Jagiellonian University, Professor Jakub Zajączkowski, University of Łódź, University of Warsaw. Which also we would like to have it here, so maybe we'll talk about salaries.
It will be great pleasure.
Professor Krzysztof Iwanek, Foundation Institute for Eastern Studies, and Patryk Kugiel. Patryk is affiliated with the Polish Institute of Foreign Affairs and works as an international affairs analyst. So I would like to start our meeting in an unusual way, maybe by talking briefly about you, about our panelists, the people who are academically involved with India. There are not so many scholars, such scholars in Poland, compared to, for example, those who study about China, Korea, China, etc. Therefore, I would like to ask you to give a few minutes long response to the following questions. Those questions are interconnected, so it's one big question. So why did you start to be interested in India? What were your inspirations related to India? What was your first day in India like? And has India changed a lot between your first and last visit to the country? I think that such questions will help us better understand you, your views, your research, your perspectives, etc., etc. I remember when I went to India for the first time, it was 1999, oh my God, 28 years ago. And when I passed the passport control, the first thing I saw and first thing I remember was the cover of the India Today, the magazine, and it was the big headline, "The Stench of Corruption." So this is what I remember from India. It was my first thing I remember from India, and it really influenced my perspective on this country and on Asia. So, floor is yours. I know, probably. Let's give the floor to Agnieszka.
Okay, hello everyone, and I'm very grateful that I was invited to participate in this panel, and we all assume that India matters, and this is why this panel was organized and we were invited. So I truly appreciate this and give you a big thank you. I would like to thank the organizers. My fascination or interest with India started when I was a kid. My grandfather had a wonderful collection of stamps, and he had Mahatma Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, and some other stamps where India was presented. And soon after, I started reading about India and the entire South Asia. But my interest related to South Asia is strictly connected with protracted conflicts, with enduring rivalries. And I was interested in India-Pakistan conflict in Kashmir. I wrote a few publications that were related to this topic. So in general, I started my interest with the analysis of security challenges, and I found South Asia a very interesting region when it comes to studying political science focused on enduring rivalries and conflicts that are practically impossible to be resolved in the foreseeable future, and such as the India-Pakistan conflict, the conflict between two nuclear neighbors, which entered the phases of escalation, de-escalation, and this is what my PhD was focused on Kashmir conflict, on conflict theory exemplified by Kashmir. So this is how I entered India, how I entered the analysis related to India. And I must say that the first country that I visited in South Asia was not India, it was Pakistan. And I visited Pakistan, I think, 8 times right now, and India only 4. So
you spent a lot of time in Kashmir?
I spent a lot of time in Kashmir right now. I've been a few times to Kashmir. and visited Pakistani side and also Indian side of Kashmir. But I've traveled across Pakistan mostly, and I visited practically all the regions within the last, let's say, a bit more than 10 years. So this was my focus. But obviously, it's not only Kashmir issue, it's not only India, Pakistan that you should focus while doing research on South Asia. Therefore, I started getting more and more interested in other countries. So I visited Nepal. I had a research project focusing on smaller states and their strategy of bandwagoning. So I focused also on Nepal, which was a very interesting study that I conducted last year. So in general, as a political scientist, I am focused on studying security policies. I teach India's foreign policy, security policy in the 21st century, and I must admit that there are more and more students who are interested in the topic. So I always have more students, so I have to allow to join the group. So I also teach Collegium Civitas about India-Pakistan business interactions and diplomacy, and I had like more than 30 students in the group last academic year. So you can notice, and this makes me really happy, that in comparison to, let's say, like last decade, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, there is a slight, slow improvement, gradual improvement, and more people are interested in this topic. I think doing research in South Asia is also, it's not only like being focused on research itself, it's also a wonderful adventure visiting South Asia. And each visit is different. When you visit different regions of the country, you can understand how diverse all these countries are, India and Pakistan, and also these smaller countries such as Nepal. So each visit gives you a wonderful lesson and enhances your experiences related to the region. And each time I go there, I find this region more and more interesting. And I think that studying India right now and focusing on India's policies and how India becomes more and more important internationally, how India is recognized, it should also translate to the general focus on research in Poland, the country which has some ambitions to be more present in Asia. But I think this topic we will cover during our meeting today, so I will stop with this.
Okay. What about you, Jakub? Professor Jakub.
Yes. Thank you very much for invitation, and good morning, good afternoon. I'm so happy to be here. And I'm very happy that I will be able to share my view on India with my colleagues and with you. So my first visit in India was quite late comparing to you, because first time I was in February 2008, and I was invited by Professor Azjatyckiej. So all of you know he's a father of European studies in India. And I remember when I landed in Delhi and I came to campus of Jawaharlal Nehru University in the night. It was about 2 o'clock in the night. And about my feelings, so it is beautiful campus, but it is completely different than our campuses in Warsaw or in Łódź. And later I remember I was in the same year in 2008. I was later in July, August, and September for 3 months in India, and I met with 200 different scholars, professors, because I was in Delhi, I was in Calcutta, I was in south of India, and I still remember all these meetings. It was, and if somebody asks me about India, I always underline, you need to speak with people. You need to meet with with people, and it was not only discussion about India as a power, not only about India foreign policy, because I focus in my research on India, but it was in some cases just beginning of a great friendship. Among these 200 scholars, people, I'm still in touch with about 20 scholars. And I think when we talk about India, what is the most important for me, it is a contact with people. People, scholars are the, without understanding them, without discussion them, it's very, very difficult to understand India as a power, India foreign policy. So, and of course, when you ask about my first reaction, in February 2008, during the first 2 days, it is, I had such feeling as most of us, from one side, laugh, I was excited, but sometimes I was completely fed up. It was some kind of contradiction, but only person who spent a little time in India, they could feel this. And I really feel this contradictory feeling. Sometimes I remember after this 3 months in this period, July, August, and September. Usually I spend the most time in different campuses as a visiting scholar because it was after PhD. I spent with, but last 2 days I was completely fed up, and I decided to go to the most expensive hotel in South and spend 2 days without any meetings, any discussion. So it was after 3 months of this study visit, I was happy, but completely. But from overside, I said, "Oh, I need just 2 days for me." But when you ask me about transformation of India, it is very good question. So since 2008 till last time I was a few years ago, it's a real big change. Also in the context of our topic, of our panel. In 2008, only some few scholars were really interested in the European Union, like Professor Jay.
Yeah.
European Union was only treated, okay, it is something like economic, maybe power, but even not in this context. I think in the last 15 years, the perception of European Union has changed dramatically, positively in India. But I will come back to this during our panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Krzysztof.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. So 2 questions I would say here. Why India and how India has changed over the past decades? So I'm kind of an outlier here in the sense that I started off my interest in India as an Indologist, in the sense that I had studied Sanskrit and Hindi. Actually, I majored in Sanskrit. And so that was much more of a study in culture and linguistics than in foreign policy or politics of India as such. And my choice had been actually random in the sense that I always wanted to study history, but the first year of studies in year 2000 turned out to be a disaster for me. I couldn't cope with studying Latin and Greek. And kind of randomly traveling on through the globe with my finger, I decided to pick India, although I had nothing. I knew nothing about India. I do remember that in high school I was the only person in class that didn't know that the currency of India is called rupee. So it was like a way of picking a country which I know least about. But I was interested from day one, memorizing Sanskrit text was something completely new for me and something I really liked about Warsaw University ideology. However, I did decide later on to move on, from linguistics and culture to studying more about India's foreign policy and domestic politics. And I think, to kind of tap into what I think we'll be discussing later, and Professor Zajączkowski mentioned this already, I think this will be changing in the sense that I don't think I'll be the last person to make such a decision. I think there will be more and more people making such decisions. It hasn't started to a big degree yet in Poland, but we saw such a change in the sense of young people taking interest in Indian contemporary politics, history, economy, foreign policy. We did have this with China recently in Poland. So like a wave of young people suddenly interested in an Asian country because the significance of that Asian country has grown. That happened to China, and I think we will have the same with India, only that, I think it will take decades because, so far India's economy is, several times smaller than China's economy. So once India will be reaching, similar levels of development that China has reached, I think we will see the same kind of, revolution interest in India, in Poland as well. And although I would say that the fact that I moved on into this subject doesn't mean I want to in any way, diminish the importance of Indology. I still think it's very important to know about Indian culture and, and to know Indian languages if you study, if you do research on India. It was just my choice. But, I would be the happiest if we could have both of the worlds. I mean, if you could have a wave of young people interested in Indian foreign policy and economy and not lose that Indology part. However, so far, we have strong Indology studies in Poland, but we don't have as strong India studies in Poland, which change when it comes to China. And speaking of changes, what changes I saw? Well, I first went to India in 2004 to study Hindi. I tried not to miss a single year of going to India ever since, although I missed the pandemic. Apart from this, I tried to go to India every single year since 2004. I think the three major changes that I saw, which is, of course, everyone is in a bubble of one's own, right? So my observations may be very different to anyone else's. But three big changes I think I saw is how much people use the internet, how many big infrastructure projects have sprang up, especially in urban areas, and thirdly, how much interest of the world has grown. How much the outside world has grown more interested in India, which you can measure by, for example, how much, foreign direct investments you can see in India, which you couldn't see, let's say, 2 decades ago. So just 3 examples here. One is the subway. When I went to Delhi in 2004, there were 2 subway lines operating in Delhi, if I'm not wrong. And they were about 30 kilometers long total. And I never used subway in Delhi in 2004 because it was very far from where I lived. As of now, I just checked. It's not that I remember it, I just checked on my phone. As of now, the Delhi subway has 10 lines. And its total length is 350 kilometers. So it's like 5 more lines than it had 2 decades ago. And it's 10 times longer than it used to be. So like the pace of building the subway in Delhi was just, amazing. And I could use the subway many times, more when I visited Delhi because it was in various places. You must remember the old Delhi airport, which is like smaller than the Okęcie airport. And I don't remember when the new India
first Okęcie.
Yes. So the old Delhi airport was smaller than the old Okęcie. The present Delhi airport is larger than the present Okęcie. Actually, the present Delhi airport is like the 6th airport in Asia when it comes to passenger traffic. And further, you can see global companies in India much more than you would see 2 decades ago. Again, just one piece of statistics here. According to India's University Grants Commission, which is a public institution, there are about 400, I think 402 maybe, private universities in India, out of which one was founded in 1980s, one in 1990s, and the remaining about 400 were established in the last 20 years. So like if you go outside Delhi, you can see those sprawling large campuses of private universities in India, all of which, or most of which, were established during the last 2 decades. Although to end up on a less positive note, I would say that this is a kind of a change that you see, especially in urban areas or close to them, in the sense that if you go outside and visit a village, possibly that village hasn't changed in India for the past 2 decades or even more. And I will end up with saying this, that this may be one of the reasons why the Prime Minister Modi and the incumbent party, BJP, didn't win the elections so smoothly. It's because, that development in India happens in certain pockets and people remain very poor outside of those.
Thank you very much.
First of all, my heartfelt thanks to the University of Łódź for having me here. This is already a very fascinating discussion. And when I first heard about this idea to bring us here last year, I couldn't wait for this. And my expectations has already been met. I think this is an absolutely fascinating way to start an academic discussion. By the question you asked to us. And I have learned a lot about my colleagues already, and it's a good beginning.
I want to prove that scholars are humans as well.
Absolutely, very good, very good.
Not like robots.
Yeah, just sitting and reading.
And talking about like my story, how it did start. It started with a journey, with travel. So when I was at this high school, I wanted to travel far away, and I had very little budget. So in the high school, I somehow came across a book written by Eddie Pyrek, with a title "Go to India for $30." Yeah. So I thought that is a really good idea. So I convinced my friend. And after we graduated from the high school, we hit the road and we tried to get to India. It turned out that we had too little budget, and we ended up in Greece, and we had to go back. So the next year, I repeated this attempt. And this time, after 2 weeks and spending $130, I reached India. Indeed, it was 2000, when India has just crossed the number of 1 billion billion people. And talking about first day, it was a very fabulous day, because I just crossed the border from Pakistan to India, at the Atari border, which is fascinating in itself. And then I get to the Golden Temple in Amritsar, which is one of the most beautiful places on earth. And I stayed in the Golden Temple for three nights.
Yeah, and it was free.
It's free accommodation, and 6 give you food and everything. So we saved some couple of dollars, even more. So that was very good for our budget. And maybe I shouldn't tell this, but we were so happy that we reached to India, and we saw a lake. Golden Temple is a beautiful temple in the middle of lake, like artificial lake, which is sacred. In Sikhism, and when I saw the lake, I just jumped in. So I take a deep into this holy lake, and then I spent a couple of days in Amritsar, and then we went around India. So we went to Kashmir, to Varanasi, to all these fascinating places. And my main takeaway from this was that I don't get it. I have no clue where am I. So it was so complicated and fascinating country. I thought that maybe I need to study this more. So I'm not Indologist, but I started looking at India from the IR perspective. And since then I've been coming very often to India. I just came back from India last week. I was observing the elections also for a couple of days. So what changed I've seen for the last quarter of century in India? I think now India and general Indian is more assertive, is wealthier, and more is aspirational. So just to give, and I will end with, on this note, just to give you the example. When I was traveling in India in early 2000s, there was a bunch of Europeans and Australians maybe wandering around and meeting in North India, in South India, and then we were meeting again and again in different spots. But it was very strange. I realized this only later. There were no Indians. There were no Indian tourists. There were only pilgrims, yeah? Because tourism is some kind of luxury, yeah? that more wealthy people can go on vacation and just for leisure. Yeah? So, and nowadays, if you travel in India, you can hardly find Europeans. There are only Indian tourists. Yeah, they have more money, they have more aspirations. They are curious about their own country. They are discovering their own country. And they have huge aspirations, and they want to go abroad and change their own country. So India now is at the verge of huge change on many accounts, whether it's an economy or politics, international politics. But this, I think, we will now discuss.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the first part of discussion. If you have any comments, just feel free. But okay. So let's move on to the topic of our meeting, which is the relationship between India and Europe. So I'd like to ask all of you to answer these three questions, but I mean, it's like one question, but in three forms. Why does India need Europe? Why does Europe need India? And who needs whom more? Who wants to start? Yeah, the same order.
Yeah, this is, I think, a very interesting and very important topic. So let me start with emphasizing the fact that today Narendra Modi comes to Europe and he is going to participate in G7 summit. And this is the exemplification of how important India is from the Western perspective. I think, as far as I remember, this is the fifth consecutive presence of Narendra Modi in the G7 summit, where India is invited and included as an actor that shapes international relations and recognized by the most powerful economies as an actor that is capable of having a contribution to shaping the security system. So the issues that will be discussed today include, for example, the Mediterranean, the challenges in the Mediterranean, the energy security, the African issues. India was recognized and has been recognized at least for the last 10 years. Let me also stress that India was engaged in bringing the African Union to the G20. So India tries to portray itself as a country that represents the so-called global South. We are the voice of the global South, and we do not want to follow the strategies of the West, the European Union or the United States. We want to be a participant, a country that shapes these relations. For sure, the European Union and the West need India. India as a democratic country. Let's say that there are many challenges. There is Hindutva. I hope that we will cover this issue today as well. But in general, all major leaders in the world, they are courting Modi. He is invited. He is recognized. Hindutva as an eternal issue is rather neglected by the West because India can be a country that may counterbalance China. I think the China issue is here the most important. The other thing is to somehow encourage India to make this geostrategic shift towards the West. So we have another issue, the invasion of Russia against Ukraine. So obviously Russia has been, since the Cold War time, a very important partner and the main arms supplier to India. But if we follow the CIPRI reports, in the last a bit more than a decade, then we see that even though India has never condemned Russia for its aggression and never officially recognized Putin as an aggressor and a leader who violated international law. Although India emphasizes the fact that it respects the international values and the rule of law and so on and so forth. But the share of Indian arms imports has shrunk. It was 76%, let me give you the data, in the years 2009-13. Then it was 58, the years 2014-2018. And now in the latest report, it's only 36. So obviously India, which is emphasizing its policy of multi-alignment, and which includes Russia. I heard the recent interview with one Indian ambassador who emphasized, oh, there is G7, there are these meetings, why Russia is not invited? So there is this discourse that Russia should be included. But on the other hand, you can see this gradual shift, and I would say that India, as a democratic country, has no other option but to cooperate more with the West. So to India, the West is very important, but also from the Western perspective, the EU is India's third largest trading partner. Obviously the EU as the organization is very important to us as Europeans, but to India, there are certain countries within the EU which are the most important. And if we look at the countries that Modi visited, in the last decade, you can see he was 7 times in France, 6 times in Germany. And that is one of the reasons I try to, as also a specialist on the German studies, I focus now and I do research in Germany following the Germany's shift and geostrategic interest in the relations with India. But this is a topic for another discussion.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka. And I fully agree with you what you underline about gradual shifting in India foreign policy in the last 10 years. Of course, if we take into account rhetoric, if we take into account a lot of speeches of Indian elites, strategic elites, if we take into account newspapers and the news, sometimes India try to underline to multi-alignment.
Yeah.
But in practice, India is aware. We need the West. We need the Western powers. We need the United States. We need the European Union, because the main question, if not a liberal international order, what kind of alternatives? Global South, okay. Sometimes India underlines, global South power. But the question is, can you see any alternatives to this order? When we talk about international liberal orders, it means institutions, it means economic, financial institutions, it means, of course, United Nations. And of course, it's very easy to criticize. But can we see any alternatives? And of course, some, and especially India started to be more and more pragmatic, and they started not only see European Union as an economic power, but also as a strategic partner. Since 2014-15, what Agnieszka told, the visit of Prime Minister Modi in France, in Germany. So India was aware, of course, but still we need to remember about one thing, that for India, the most important strategic political partner is still United States. It is still United States. It was some kind of a little tensions between India and the European Union, I think, in 2014-15, when the European Union was a little much more focused on China. It was of course, China factor was very important. But later, in 2019-20, when European Union started to be more skeptical on China, the relation between European Union and India started to be more closer. But of course, the big question was the war in Ukraine and the reaction of India towards this war. And of course, everybody expected that it could be some kind of dramatic tensions between European Union and India. But what, Agnieszka, you told, the statistics, slowly, no, not in the rhetoric. In rhetoric, India tried to understand, tried to sometimes you could see some kind of ambivalent approach of India towards Moscow. But in practice, if you look at the statistics, meetings, India slowly goes in the direction of closer cooperation with United States and the European Union. And the last sentence, but also European Union understood we need India, because if European Union accepted in 2021 EU strategy towards Indo-Pacific, it is quite obvious which country is the most important: India. So, and I think European Union understood one thing in the context of war in Ukraine: we should have some clear strategy. What we really wanted to do with India. What does it mean common values? What does it mean democracy? Very often India and European underline, we put stress on democratic values. But what does it mean in international relations? So I think one key word Patryk and Krzysztof underlined: infrastructure, development of infrastructure. So European Union understood one thing, that if we want to be a real partner with India, we should have very coherent strategy. Coherent strategy in the sense of economic dimension, political dimension, and of course cultural relations. And the last sentence: I think India is much more better in using European Union to achieve own goals. Much better, because India try to use European Union to increase own position in Asia. So that's why if we have more time, we could discuss about this, but probably Patryk could develop this issue in some selective area. If we take international order, in some issues, India try to support European Union, in some maybe be more ambivalent. But India, in the last 5-6 years, India started to use the European Union in a very instrumental way to increase its own position in Asia.
Yeah, so why does India need Europe and why does Europe need India? If I were to say this in one sentence, I would say this: India needs Europe's capital and know-how, and Europe needs India's people. But to kind of elaborate on this, India, I think mainly, like if I were again to pick one thing, it needs FDI. It needs investment from the EU for 4 main reasons, I would say. One is, of course, simply as a source of capital. Second is, to create jobs. Third is to, allow technology transfer, to learn the European know-how. And the fourth reason is China. So I'll just elaborate on some of those points. India is one of the main reasons why India is in dire need of FDI is that being the most populous country in the world, although that's unconfirmed because they haven't surveyed their population since 2011, but being presumably the most populous country in the world, India still has more people living in the countryside than in the cities. And can you imagine this? So the world's most populous country has more people in the villages than in the cities, right? So we'll still have to wait for the new survey, for the new census, but it is assumed that over 60% of people in India still live in the rural areas, and around 70% of India's total population are connected in one way or the other to the agricultural sector, right? So it is inevitable that, you know, a developing economy will see a shift, you know, so the population shift of those millions and hundreds of millions of people actually, you know, shifting from the rural areas to the urban areas. Now, someone has to find jobs for them. And since, you know, many of them are not very qualified, the main, you know, thing that the government, I think, Indian government rightly bets on is heavy industry. So like they need to create those huge manufacturing units that can, you know, employ those people that will be gradually shifting from the countryside. And this is where, you know, the EU with its large companies can step in. This is where, you know, Japan, the US can step in. And by the way, that's not something that, you know, Russia can offer to India. So India needs our investment because of capital, because of jobs, because of technology. Professor Zajączkowski mentioned weaponry. So here also European technology matters. In fact, the technology of one country, specifically France, has become one of the top exporters of, you know, high value arms to India. Most of the other countries in Europe cannot offer this, but, you know, France has. This is why one of the main reasons how France became one of the top partners of India. And finally, the reason why India needs our FDI, well, one of the fourth reason is China, because, you know, China is India's top trading partner, but at the same time, it's India's biggest rival. So that's another paradox of India. One is, you know, the biggest population, but mostly living in rural areas. And the second thing is you have a trading partner, which is also your rival. To decrease its dependence on China, what India would really like to do, and their government is saying this, you know, openly, is they would like to move more and more manufacturing into India so that they can manufacture on their own what they were so far importing from China. And this is also why they need FDI from Europe. On the other hand, why the EU, why Europe needs India? Well, we need Indian services, for example. Actually, the exports of Indian services is growing more dynamically than Indian commodities. India doesn't have so many commodities to offer, in fact. But it does have services. We do also need Indian investment. And actually, there is investment coming the other way around too. India's economy is smaller than the economy of the EU, but India's economy per nominal GDP is still larger than the economy of any EU country barring Germany. Germany is the only country with a larger economy than India. So even in Poland, we saw some investments by Indian companies, not so much, but in the last several years. So we need their services, their investment too, and their people. And I will end with this. So if you ask me who needs who more, I would say that for now, strictly economically speaking, it seems that India needs us more. Professor Kuszewska-Bohnert, you know, referred to one statistic. The EU is India's third largest trading partner, but the other way around, India for the EU is the 10th largest trading partner, so much less. But in the long run, they have a rising demographic, and we have a falling demographic. Just to give a final, you know, piece of statistics. When in 2022 Russia invaded Ukraine, there were many Indians to be, you know, evacuated from Ukraine. About 20,000 people, most of which, around 18,000, were students who ended up studying in Ukraine for some reason because there weren't enough, you know, slots at colleges in India, and because it was more expensive to study in India medicine than to study it in Ukraine. So that way, with our falling demographics and our schools and our universities needing more students, we have a rising demographic in India, and we have a lot of people that need places to work and to study. So I think it's a kind of a natural win-win situation. And looking at this way, capital versus people, we need each other to the same degree.
It's hard to add anything.
Let's move to
Take the order next time.
Let's change the order now. Yeah.
I agree with most or everything what has been said. I will echo probably some arguments. So first of all, why India does need Europe? I agree that there are many reasons, but the most important are economical ones. And India needs Europe to grow economically very fast, to provide jobs. And this is probably a key word. Because of jobs, Modi didn't do as good as he wanted to in the last elections. He promised in 2014 to turn India into new China, into global hub of manufacturing and global factories, to create 250 million jobs for the young population, and he didn't deliver. The share of manufacturing in Indian economy has decreased in the last 10 years rather than increase, and it's around 12%, which is absolutely minimal comparing to other countries. So jobs, and good quality jobs and well-paid jobs, is what India needs desperately. Otherwise, what is being said as a demographic dividend that India can enjoy, having a population younger by 10 years than Chinese and 20 years than, for example, Germans, this demographic dividend can turn into a demographic catastrophe if those young people are left without a prosperity option to realize their aspirations. And you probably know what does it mean in practice. It means that India needs to create 1 million new jobs every month, 12 a year, or maybe even more sometime. Yeah? So it's not an easy task to create new factories, new sectors of economy, to provide so many jobs. And to do this, as Krzysiek said, India needs European capital, investments, technologies, and markets, probably European markets, yeah, to create something that it can be exported to other countries, including to Europe. And other security strategic issues like China and everything, it's all correct, but I think the economy is the most important. Yeah? This is the strategic goal for India, to become a developed country in 2047, when India will turn 100 years old as a modern contemporary state. And this is a very ambitious task. India has a huge potential, but we have been talking about India as an emerging power and a country with huge potential for the last 25 years or maybe more. So it's not an easy task to realize this. And for this, India needs those who has capital and technologies and markets. And this is certainly not Russia, and probably not China, because of the very tense relations between two countries. So Japan, Europe, and US, yeah? And then recently Gulf states are becoming big players in this regard, but nevertheless, the West, as US and Europe, is the most important for India in this regard. And why Europe needs India? For the very similar reasons, economic ones. And we are interested mostly in the European market. You can say in European people, but not to bring them here, but but we would like to see them as the customers of our European cars and other products that we can produce and send to India. And here our interests collide. Yeah? We want to enter the Indian markets, and they don't want European products to enter the market. They are still very protective because they want European investments, not products. They want European countries and companies to set up factories in India rather than send ready-made products. So therefore, we have very opposite views and needs and aspirations when it comes to economic cooperation. And therefore, we cannot conclude, for example, a free trade agreement for the last more than 15 years, because we want access to the market, and Indians want our capital and technologies rather than products. So this will remain very difficult task to reach an agreement on FTA. Maybe we'll talk this later, but nevertheless, Europe looks at India as a second unsaturated, huge market after China. And since we have some difficult relations with China, we would like to diversify them. You can't find any more promising market than India's because of its size and scale and growing richness of the people there. We also need India because this is a major power. And to do anything in contemporary relations, India must be on board. When we want to tackle the climate change, we can't do this without India. Terrorism and you name it, whatever you'd like to say, India must be part of the solution. Otherwise, it will be against us, against the West, on a number of international forums. It will get closer to BRICS countries. It will get closer to Global South countries and form a coalition against the West. So we understand this, that we need to have India on our side rather than push it to other authoritarian states and a coalition of developing countries that can be turned against the West. So we need India to be on our side to accommodate some of India's aspiration to create more stable new international order. We will need to change this order. India demands this, and it's right to demand the change in international order. And we should treat India as a partner in doing this. We cannot reject India's claims, otherwise we will create an enemy. And we have enough enemies at the moment in the West. So that's probably the thinking in the West. And who needs who more? Last sentence, I think India needs us more. And we need to capitalize on this, because this need for jobs, for growth, economic growth, is very urgent. India can't wait 10 years or 20 years for this. It will lose its moment in history, its window of opportunity. So Europe and the West in general has a leverage that we can use in order to realize also our aims, in other things, strategic and etc. We can use this card smartly and stay close to India, to have India in, let's say, on our side.
Thank you. Kuba, I will ask the next question and then you will comment. So now I'd like to ask a question to two panelists and then another question to another two panelists, because it will let us to talk about more topics. I remember when I was just 14 years ago, when I took my students to India, and we're walking in Delhi. After 1 hour of walking in Delhi, they asked me, Professor, why some journalists, scholars, etc., what do they call India superpower? Poverty is everywhere. People sleep on the street, etc., etc., etc. And that's why I want to ask, and first I want to, you wrote a book about international India in international relations in 2008. So before you went to India for the first time.
Yes.
And chapter number 3 starts like this. In the opinion of many scholars, India is already, thanks to the economic reform started in the early 90s, the modernization of army, etc., an emerging power. And I would like, can you comment on it in about 20 years later? In other words, is India already great power? Superpower, global power, however we call it. And it's the question to you and Agnieszka. Okay, you can comment if you want, but
thank you very much for this comment and your question. It's a perfect question, and in this context I would like to refer what Patryk told, and I would like to refer to Professor Subrata Mitra he was a director of the Department of Political Science of South Asia Institute at University of Heidelberg. And he told 10 years ago in one of the paper, very easy assumption. He put very easy assumption. If India doesn't solve economic, social problem, India will be forever emerging power. And what Patryk told, India is aware of this. Of course, if you compare what was in the 90s, 2000, 2010, 2024, India has made a huge development. If we take into account infrastructure, if we take into account economic indicators, military indicators, India made a huge development. But still it is a lot of problems, like illiteracy, like poverty in villages. What my colleagues Krzysztof and Patryk told already. And in this context, I wanted to underline what my colleagues told. Coming back to your question, who needs more? I think it is in this context, one important thing. Money loves stability. Money loves stability. That's why I think I would not only limit to economic dimension. Why? Because if money loves stability for both sides, for India, but also for European Union, what is not good? Polarity between US-China. Polarity between US-China would cause that India would be on the periphery. Who will talk with India if everybody would focus on bipolar competition between US and China? So it is in the interest of India and the European Union to have multipolar world where European Union, India is one of the players. Of course, the biggest player, it will be United States and China, but India and the European Union are not interested in a growing competition between US-China. It's not good for both of them. So it is what is the common. That's why in the last years, despite a lot of differences, India and the European Union would like to go beyond these economic indicators. But still, to answer for your question, I think this book was published in 2008. So after how many years? It's after 16 years. I think India is treated more seriously. It is, if I compare what was it 16 years ago and nowadays, India is treated more seriously, not only by political elites, but this I think also by public opinion. In 2007, 2008, when I remember when I started this project, the European funded project, India Center at the University of Warsaw, everybody asked, why India? India is so important. Everybody was completely focused on China. I think we could see in the European Union and also in Poland, not only among politicians, but also public opinion is more and more aware that we must treat India more seriously. But about status, still it is, I would treat India more in the context of regional power. As a regional power, of course, India is regional power in Indo-Pacific, but about global power, still India needed to make more efforts, mainly in the context of economic indicators.
Yeah, I fully agree with what you've said, and I will continue with your statement that not only political leaders, but also the public opinion, the people in Europe, they recognize India even more. There was a research conducted by the Pew Research Center in 2019. And according to this research, 49% of people in France, 46% in the UK, 47% in Sweden, they recognize that India's position had increased in the last decade. That is interesting because there was a difference between Western Europe and Central Europe, unfortunately, because in Poland only, as far as I remember, 17% recognized that India's position had risen in the previous decade. So there is a difference for sure. When it comes to India as a global power or rising power, this is also an interesting question. When I was in Kolkata just before the pandemic, I had very fruitful discussions with academics and with students. And they were asking me, okay, you in Europe, in the West, you're constantly saying that we are rising. So we are rising, and it's never ending. We are constantly rising, but you can't question that you are a rising power, a regional power with aspirations, as Professor Zajączkowski said, because you have the economic problems. 44% of Indian youth, people aged 20-24, are jobless. This is it's a tremendous challenge. If this challenge is not met, if the middle class is not supported by the Modi regime in the upcoming years, then he will lose in next elections. You can see the approach already. He hoped to have 400 seats, the giant victory, but it didn't happen because you can't feed people with Hindu nationalism.
Infrastructure projects.
Yes, infrastructure projects mostly for upper class.
Okay, so the next question to Krzysiek and Patryk. So we have had an election in India, so I want to ask whether this election have changed or will change anything regarding to the European relations. And another questions, can Hindutva, the version of Hindu nationalism, impact the relations between India and Europe? Not.
Patryk, would you like to go first this time?
Really? Yeah. So I will leave the Hindutva question up to you, and I will take this question about the impact of the elections on relations with Europe. I think it will be positive because there is a stable government in India with still strong democratic mandate. Of the Modi government, which got a message clearly sent by the electorals that they need jobs and inclusive growth. So therefore, Modi will find itself under huge pressure to deliver finally on these promises he made some time ago. And for this, he needs Europe even more. It's like connected to our previous turn of questions. So I think there will be internal pressure on the one hand on Modi to strike some kind of deal with Europe, to get bigger access to the European market, to get more investments from Europe. So he might be more willing to compromise when it comes to FTA negotiations and foreign direct investments protection agreement. Another very important agreement that is missing between Europe and India. In order to incentivize European companies to invest in India and create jobs in India, one needs to give them a minimal protection, which is now not there. So investment protection agreement, I think, will be put on the high priority, and we can expect some fast progress on this account. The FTA will be more difficult. As I said, on the one hand, Modi is under pressure to get a bigger access to European markets, and to have some kind of breakthrough in this trade negotiations. But on the other hand, unfortunately, being a leader of the coalition government, he might be less willing to go to make a compromise, because he's not the only one in charge anymore. And he must be listening to regional parties from Andhra Pradesh and from Bihar, which might sound like an FTA at the expense, for example, of Indian farmers. Trade in food products could be a divisive issue. And so there are two forces that will impact India's approach to FTA with India, contradictory, and we will see which one will win, whether the opposition to any concessions or some kind of willing to compromise on this. But at the same time, what is positive, I think, is this political and ideological angle of the results, that the Indian democracy proved working well. Despite huge criticism it has attracted in the last couple of years, the Western press especially. The elections were fair and honest, and open and everything. So democracy is working. So we will have even increased faith in India as a fellow traveler, as a like-minded country. So I think this will create even better mutual understanding between Western European countries and India. It will create more trust. And in the spirit of trust, I can expect also that European countries will be willing to go to make a bigger compromise on economic issues as well. We want to keep India on our side. We want to get some access to the Indian market. But at the same time, maybe we put the bar too high to include all the sustainability clauses and other things into the free trade agreement. So I think we will be heading in a direction of having a lighter FTA. Not that ambitious as the European Commission wanted to have, but we need to be more realistic and pragmatic, and India cannot agree on our green climate change, for example, clauses, and labor standards and everything. So we need to be more accommodative of India's concerns. So I think in general, we are on a trajectory that India and Europe and US is getting closer and closer. So after elections will only help in this. So the result is very, very positive in my view.
First, about elections and their how they could affect India's foreign policy and relations with Europe. Well, first thing I would like to say is that somehow India is regionally often a very unstable country, but somehow, despite this, India's foreign policy is remarkably stable. If you look at India's foreign policy over the past 3 decades or so, regardless of who was in power, and there used to be even, very unstable coalition governments in power, their relations with major, players in the world were more or less the same. For instance, India kept deepening its relations with the US, regardless of who was in power. India also retained her partnership with Russia, regardless of who was in power. Even recently, Rahul Gandhi, one of the top opposition politicians in India, was asked, what would have he done had he been in power regarding Russia? He would say, well, more or less, I think we would have done the same as Modi did had we been in power regarding Russia. So this was an open statement that actually, India's foreign policy, in his view, would be the same towards Russia, and not only that. So I don't expect major changes, because simply there are usually no major changes in India's foreign policy after elections, no matter what those elections bring. However, I would tap into more to what Patryk said. So there is this instability inherent in the present coalition. Thanks for displaying this. So as we mentioned before, the BJP has 240 lawmakers at the moment in India's lower house of parliament, the Lok Sabha, and you need 272 to close the majority mark. You can even see it in the chart. So they are far below, they are 32 lawmakers below the majority mark on their own. And to rule, Modi mainly needs 3 main coalition partners: Shiv Sena with 7 lawmakers, Janta Dal with 12, and Telugu Desam with 16 lawmakers. And this is what Patryk mentioned. So I think it may have a negative impact on Modi's government and his, international dealings too, because as Patryk rightly mentioned, whatever major reform Modi undertakes, he will have to factor in at least those three allies. And those three allies, as Patryk rightly said, are regional parties. So it's, all boils down to money. You need, funds for a large project, but your allies want those funds for projects in their specific regions. Mainly, I think Telugu Desam Party, as the largest coalition partner, will want a special status for the state they represent, Andhra Pradesh, and for the new capital they are building, Amravati. The state's coffers are not, bottomless. I mean, to buy their loyalty, Modi will need to decrease spending on other, objectives so that those coalition partners are happy. So I think some of the projects that, India could do with Europe will not be that easy. And as Patryk rightly said, these parties also represent large electorates that, for example, represent, agriculturalists that are not happy with, decreasing tariffs on agricultural products that would be imported from Europe. So some of the things that Modi's government could do with Europe, I think, will be harder now with this coalition government. And last but not least, Hindutva, which, as you rightly said, Grzegorz, means Hindu nationalism. I think it's a very concerning political force. I think it's overall a very negative political force in India, but it mainly matters domestically. In the sense that, yes, Modi has this long history with Hindu nationalism, but probably is too long to mention. But just very briefly, let us remind the audience that Modi the Prime Minister of India himself used to be denied a visa to go to the US or United Kingdom because of how his party treated Muslims. So, I mean, it's clearly concerning, but then, everyone had to, come to terms with the fact that he is the Prime Minister of an elected government. And he now travels freely to the US, and as was mentioned, to the EU as well. So Hindutva as a force of nationalism, I think is very strong. It's stronger in India than ever before. You can see it in how, for example, even private media began to portray Hinduism and Muslims. You can see it in instances such as the 2020 riots in Delhi, in the capital of the country itself, where Muslims were attacked by radical Hindus. But all of this, I don't think it plays out in any way when Modi goes to the US or when he goes to France or when he goes to Germany. I don't think it is mentioned at all. I also think that, so India's foreign policy interests are stronger than Hindutva. And I also think, I may be wrong about this, but I hope I'm not. I also think that India's democracy is stronger than Hindutva at the end of the day. I mean, the Hindu nationalists, as they rule India now, they are not ruling for the first time. They used to win elections in the past. And whenever they lost, and they did lose a number of times, they would, quietly relinquish power and, give away to opposition. I mean, India is a democracy, and India hardly ever had a period when democracy was suspended. It was like only 18 months in 1975 to 1977. So while it is concerning that Modi himself is a Hindu nationalist, I think there will come a time when he will lose elections and then he will relinquish power.
Might I add something? Yeah, I do agree that this is primarily a domestic strategy to mobilize the supporters of the BJP. But there are certain elements of the BJP strategy which are also included in the foreign policy, while India is projecting itself as this Vishwaguru, the teacher. We will teach the world what democracy is because our democracy is like more than 1,000 years old. So there is this approach that we are above others, which is a part of the Hindu nationalism. But this is like a discursive level. It is there. What I'm concerned about is Modi's actions in the during this third term, when he didn't win as he wanted, that he is a person with some narcissistic approach. He has to show himself as the leader of the world's democracy. And his actions may be hazardous in the domestic policies. These policies that are based on divisions, on polarizing society, on excluding not only Muslims, because it's not as simple Hindus versus Muslims, but also secular Hindus or those Hindus who are not part of the Hindutva project. And this may be dangerous to India because India's key major asset is its diversity and its democracy. And if you reject these assets and if you are among the countries that are in the group of electoral autocracies, according to Widem, Gothenburg-based analysis, and if you're in Freedom Press Index on the 161st position, as far as I remember, out of 180 countries, so it means there is a challenge. There is a problem with the democratic backsliding in India. And let's hope that the further decline will be prevented, because this is within India's interest to remain democratic. And I do believe, and I'm even sure, that the vast majority of Indian society, these people realize it perfectly well. And if the BJP and Modi become too authoritarian, they will be deprived of power in the next elections.
Thank you very much. So 10 minutes left. I prepared a lot of questions, but one question must be asked. But before I will do it, I have the question whether you have any questions from the audience, our panelists.
Please.
Okay, so two questions, yeah?
Okay, so you mentioned that not only analysts and academic, let's say, society, but also politicians focus on China, or at least started seeing its role. Now, in case of Poland, I think that there is no interest in China. Correct me if I'm wrong, on the, let's say, administration level and politicians and decision makers. Let's look at the case of bilateral political dialogue between Poland and India. There is non-existing, I think, which is pretty alarming, I would say. No Poland's ambassador in India for a year or something like that, if I'm not wrong. And now my question is, of course, I know that we could debate and discuss it over hours and days probably, but are there any points, like major points, that should be included in potential policy strategy towards India, in your opinion, and how this strategy should look like if there will be any adopted?
All right, so this is the question I prepared. It's the last my question. So
okay.
I will ask the question. Yeah. So I prepared it for Agnieszka and Krzysztof, but you can. So what are the Polish-Indian relations like?
Yeah, sure.
I've read a report prepared by Krzysztof in 2020, indicating that Polish-Indian relations practically do not exist. This is my opinion after reading your report. Maybe I'm wrong. And I know that you are a friend with Mr. Burakowski, the former ambassador to India. You wrote a book with him, so maybe you can tell us some details about these relations. Yeah. Krzysztof, good.
So, yeah.
Should I go first?
Yeah.
I wasn't the ambassador, he was, so no, I don't think I can share any details. But I would agree in general that Poland's relations with India are rather weak. What we miss, I guess, a lot of things. One thing is that Poland is not visible in India in any way, and I don't think our governments, past and present, had any clear idea about how we should be seen in India. By the way, it's an uphill task. I'm not saying that there is that any particular one Polish government within 4 years of tenure could change this. It's something that takes decades, but. I would say that, like, if you want to craft a strategy towards India, how to, engage with, Indian capital, Indian services, Indian people, we need to understand how much India is focused on herself. This may sound the wrong way, but let me elaborate just for a moment. In our, the way we see ourselves and the way we discuss, history with, for example, Europe, Second World War, communism, Holocaust are very important. And I'm not denying they were important. I'm not denying they're, for example, very important in our relations with Germany or Russia, for instance. But, hardly any events concerning the Second World War took place in India. I mean, the Second World War hardly, touched India. Holocaust didn't happen in India, and so far, and so on, and so forth. So, when I see Poland, describing itself, showing itself to the world, I think the points that we work on are not the ones that work towards India, because this is simply not their history. And instead, if I were to craft a strategy of how Poland should be seen in India, I would craft it more in the line of that we are a nation, of skilled engineers. And that's something that, by the way, not me. I'm terrible at that stuff. No, I'm not a person that can fix anything. But the thing is, first of all, I know it's important here, but I wouldn't, underline how much we went through. All the, those calamities, those wars we went through. That's not something that will work there. I wouldn't, focus on that national martyrology, but on our, successes, and those successes, and that is important. That is, I think, I don't see too much on those successes that would mean anything to people in India or in Asia. For instance, it's very little known, not only in India, but also in Poland, that the city of Chandigarh, a modern city built in 1960s in India, its urban plan was devised by an US and a Polish architect jointly, Andrzej Nowicki, who died during that work. And that's something that is hardly ever mentioned. And, that's something that, first of all, it's something important for Indians, that a Polish person did it for Indians. And secondly, it's not based on our own history, on martyrology, but something that shows our successes. The same we have with Singapore, right? Krystyn Olszewski was the person that developed Singapore's, urban development plan. And I don't think it's too much known, both in Poland and in Asia. So these are the things I would, work on more, so that we could, then convince Indians to invest here or to trade with us, and so on, and so forth. Agnieszka,
yeah, sure. I would agree with you. I also published, like in 2015, an article about Polish relations with Pakistan and with India. And then another chapter in the book in English this time, where I emphasize that there is a potential. We've been talking about the potential. I mean, we were invited to the foreign ministry more than 10 years ago when we were emphasizing that we should also focus more on India. But still, it's not materialized that much. And let me just compare Poland to Germany. The bilateral trade is $26 billion in case of Germany, and Poland not more than $5.6 billion per year. So for sure, there is much more potential. What we need is to come up with coherent strategy, Asia strategy, and the strategy, a chapter of this strategy that would be specifically focused on India, and the official, which would include the official recognition of India as an important player. Because I think that with this, martyrology, with this focus on ourselves and our plight and our suffering, we are forgetting that from the India's perspective, we are not a very significant actor, but for sure we have much more potential that we are using. And we need the high-level delegations, high-level meetings. Like, for example, Germany, they are visiting India on a regular basis. They have in 2022, they had 6 India-Germany intergovernmental consultations. So we need these kinds of platforms to discuss important issues. We are not visible. So if our leadership is not interested in visiting India, in knowing more, and it's underestimating India largely, then we should not expect that India will come up first, because India has more important strategies. Now they are also focusing on Italy. As I said, this G7, it's mentioned that Italy is also an important partner. So we have within the EU, apart from the UK, of course, we have primarily France when it comes to arms trade, as it was mentioned. I think France is responsible now for 33% of arms trade to India. And then we have Germany, which is also an interesting case here, because we can see the very important shift in Germany's policy. Its policy is not only focused on economic development, infrastructure, renewable energy, the so-called green energy investment, but last year, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius visited India, and Germany is interested in bolstering a defense partnership. So they will try to develop cooperation. They want to build additional submarines with India, like 6 submarines within the next year. So there is a deal, memorandum of understanding signed by Indian and German companies. So something concrete, like India needs naval balance with China. And Germany is coming up with the idea. So this is like a flagship project. So we do have a very important shift in Germany's strategy. Germany wants to recognize India as a strategic partner along with Japan. And why we are not doing this? We should at least introduce these policies and declare openly that India should be recognized as a strategic partner for Poland, and we can do whatever it is possible to develop multidimensional relations. But we need a clear strategy. Otherwise, it might be very difficult.
Okay, so Patryk, last question, answer, me, and lunch.
Hello, Mike. Okay, I have a couple of points. I will try to be fast, not to stay between you and lunch, but I would like to share something positive with you. But probably you said that one needs decades to change a perception and a relationship between India and Poland and other countries. I think it's too pessimistic. Okay. It can be done very fast. Take a look at last 2 examples of Greece and Italy. Greece has probably half of trade of Poland and India. Greece was never an important country for India. They have very little Indian diaspora. They had no connections at all. And last year, Prime Minister Modi paid a visit to Greece after 43 years of break. Strategic partnership was signed out of nowhere, out of the blue. There was nothing ready. Something happened between those countries. And this year at Raisina, Prime Minister of Greece was the state of the honor of guest, the key guest of the Raisina, and having a bilateral visit in Delhi. In 1 year, the relationship has been transformed. And with this, the perception of Greece in India. Second example, Italy. Italy has the worst relationship with India 10 years ago because of the issue of the Italian Marines jailed in India. They had no diplomatic relations at all, and everything was frozen for many years. And nowadays, guess who is the most popular European leader in India? Giorgia Meloni, who today will be probably hugging Prime Minister Modi at the G7 summit in Italy. Now they became very good friends in just 1 year. They have signed strategic partnership, like Greece did. Out of nowhere, there was nothing before. And Giorgia Meloni, her personal charisma and her will to do change, they clicked with Prime Minister Modi. And when Meloni was in India last year, she became the most popular European leader. They even coined this hashtag, Melody, Modi and Meloni, and it's overblown the internet in India. The popularity of this, and they took a nice selfie, and it was fantastic, fabulous. Yeah, it was very popular. So everyone now knows who is Prime Minister of Italy in India. I hardly can say this about the Prime Minister of Poland. So it's doable. But probably to do this, first of all, what you need is political will. Without political will at the highest level of the government, we can't do anything. And there is no interest in India in Poland.
Yeah.
This is true. And to me, this is at alarming level. We are outlier in the European Union. We are lagging behind every and each European Union country. There is a long queue of European leaders going to Delhi, trying to organize a visit and meet Prime Minister Modi from many countries except Poland. And to me, it was also very disappointing how the Indian elections, the huge, the greatest elections in history, has been covered in the Polish media. How we can have any understanding and knowledge about India where we don't even have a journalist, a correspondent in Delhi. There was no one, only Tomasz Augustyniak as a freelancer journalist, but he went and spent a month covering the elections, the huge elections, which should be an opportunity to tell our society more about India. India is a fascinating country. You can make number of important reportage and TV shows and everything on India, from society, culture, economy, everything is booming. It's a very fascinating country, and we missed this opportunity. There was no any proper journalist being sent to India to cover the elections. I even went there for the last 10 years of the elections. So I tried to step into the shoes of the journalists. I even recorded some videos on my Twitter account. You can have a look. I was trying to, to do for, instead of not having a journalist, I was trying to do their job, but it's incorrect. I did very badly my job, but because I'm not journalist. But there was no alternative. Polish media didn't pay attention, and Polish society will not put any pressure on our politicians to do this. And why it is important? You ask about whether India is an emerging power or not. I think India has emerged. It is a major power, global power. Maybe not at the same level like China and the US, but probably the third most important and consequential country in the world. And we need to wake up in Poland. We need to wake up to this reality and start treating India as such. Otherwise, we will stay where we are, in the scanson of Europe when it comes to global politics. So there is a lot of things to be done. I think what you did, you mentioned, to bring students to India is a fantastic idea. I think in general, but maybe I went nuts. Forgive me for this, but I think every Polish citizen should have an obligatory visit to for children, if they see the playgrounds and everything in India, they will admire how wealthy and lucky they are living in Poland. They will not be, they will not be complaining about the school. They will love going to school, because if they see how aspirational and eager to learn are Indian children, even when they need to climb for 2 kilometers in the Himalayas to sit on the, on the floor under the tree, because this is the only opportunity they can have some kind of education. So for children, it's good. For politicians, it would be also good to see how the world has changed. For students, for journalists, everyone would benefit from the visit of India. I think it should be obligatory in schools at some point. And last thing, looking ahead, the strategy question, what we can do in detail, this is very heavy question. So we will not touch this today. We need to work on this, and we might prepare one. But one new idea I'm at least trying to work for the next year is to try to link the IMEC project with 3Cs initiative. That can be a strategic idea to show why Europe is important why Poland is important for India. and why India might be important for us. Yeah. If we talk about connectivity, IMEC, you know, I don't know if it's clear for you. What IMEC is a new idea announced at the G20 last year in Delhi by the US, Indians, Europeans, India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. That has got a lot of attention, and then everyone is now talking how to realize this. We have a war in Gaza, so maybe it's useless or not. But anyway, they have an idea to connect India to Greece. And what then? Then it's the place for 3 Seas initiative and link it north-south from the Mediterranean Sea to Baltic, to Germany, to Nordic states. Each of these countries has very much better relations with India than we have. And we need to use this opportunity. And also our opportunity has having a presidency next year in the European Council, yeah? And having a summit for the 3 Seas initiative. So it's the time to act. But for this, to realize, we need a political will. We need politicians who understand this.
So you're talking about the hashtags. I've created one, the Modi task. Task means what elephant has here. Modi task in Europe. So, okay, last question.
It's very much connected to what you just said. You talked a lot about building this theoretical framework, strategic framework for diplomatic, is also economic. And my question concerns this more practical aspect. Yes, does Poland have any FDI investment in India? Polish companies, have they invested in any way in India? And maybe if they have, this could be a starting point. Yes, they could spread knowledge about how doing business in India works and what profits can come from it, and they could in fact trigger a change in the Polish perception of India, as in Polish recognition of India's economic potential.
So very quickly, if I may. So first of all, I think it's not only a problem of political will, but what Agnieszka told, it is lack of coherent strategy. It is a main problem. And when you ask about economic investment, economic cooperation, I would come back what Patryk told. It's even Poland will never be like Germany or France for India, or like United States. I think it is a lack for them thanks. My observation is that we really don't fulfill academic potential. Student exchange. It is the best ambassadors. No, if more students from India would come to us, more students for master program, for PhD program come, later they could be real ambassadors, and vice versa. Because still the problem 10 or 15 years ago, Professor Modi wrote about deficit of information. It's much better than 10, 15 years ago, but still awareness of business elites. It's very low. Yeah. Business elites prefer in Poland to go to make investment to China. So, but first of all, we need it is not a problem of will, but it is more because as we were all together, how many discussions we had in Minister of Foreign Affairs, how many meetings in Minister of Commerce. Everybody underlined, yes, India is important, but later we don't have concrete action, we don't have concrete strategy. So to answer for your question, I'm not focused so much on economic issue, but I would not start only from economic. I would develop student exchange, professor exchange, awareness. And one very important thing, and all of you are aware, especially in India, professors, the dean, the rectors are quite important part of this discussion. They are very active in media. So it could be one solution. And the second issue, it is let's use Polish presidency. next year, because will be more attractive if we use as a Poland economic European Union instruments to promote Poland as an attractive country. And now what I could see, it is some kind of ad hoc activities. Let's do something. And for example, and last but not least, you mentioned, some of you mentioned about this. German recognized India, Japan as a strategic partners. Why Poland didn't recognize? The problem is, of course, China factor. China and the approach of Poland towards Indo-Pacific. Because still it's a debate. And if we compare Poland to Czech Republic, in Czech Republic, the government already talk about Indo-Pacific strategy. They have an Indo-Pacific strategy. So it is not only a will, but of course it is connected with decision-making process. So first of all, we need to recognize India as a power, important element of Indo-Pacific, to have coherent strategy and not to exaggerate. We never be like German, we never be like France, but let's use, as Patryk told, let's use very concrete initiative based on coherent strategy.
Coherent strategy that should include various events. For example, last November, I participated in India Week in Hamburg, and that was absolutely amazing because researchers came, experts came, business community, and they could learn from each other, they could meet each other. And that was organized by the city of Hamburg. Why Warsaw is not organizing these kinds of events? And that was a 10th edition already. I haven't heard about such an initiative in Warsaw or in any other city of Poland. And it doesn't cost that much to connect people. And I think this is quite important. I also have some trainings with Polish companies. Not so many, but some are interested, but I do not receive any feedback thereafter, unfortunately. They are interested in India, but they encounter some problem, very cautious, and there is, because of the lack of knowledge also, and this kind of apprehension that maybe it's too risky, we will invest a lot of time and money, and the different culture. You need more time. You need time to invest when you want contacts with Indian partners. It's not like you go 2 days, boom, boom, you sign everything and you come back. You need to learn culture as well, to understand how it is there in India to introduce, to meet people, to spend time with them, and then to build trust, which takes time. In Poland, we are too hasty. We're just focused on, we go and maybe we need 2 days and we come back because we have other issues. And these people there, they feel they are a bit neglected. It's not like this. You should not work in this way. And this is what we lack, the knowledge about how to deal with people. It's not only about business. It's not only about economy. It's also about these cultural differences. People to people contact, when you need to know that you need to invest time and patience. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
As low sensitivity.
Okay, so thank you very much. We have to extend this meeting, but we are scholars. We are here to discuss, not to eat. So, sorry. I just want to invite to the project. I mean, I would like to prepare, not write, but prepare the book consisting in interviews with all leading scholars, all leading Polish scholars. This conversation about India, about your personal experiences, about funny stories about India, and then about serious things. So I will contact you if you agree. So we will do it together. And now it's
because it's a very good idea, and we need such kind of initiative to promote.
And now it's time. I just want to say thank you. You don't have time. The lunch is waiting.
Thanks a lot.